Well, it's a very warm welcome back, all my fun-loving vintage dirt bike YouTubers, and I hope I find you all in the very best of health during these unprecedented times that we're now currently living in. Now, it's been many weeks since we've been able to ride out on our vintage dirt bikes, but I hope I'm still keeping up your interest in off-road racing by looking at more of these classic machines. So hope you'll stay with me for the next few minutes as we check out a couple of very nice classic BSA Victors. Now, this lovely pair of BSA Victors are just a couple of machines I spotted at the 2018 Scottish Motorcycle Show. Now, the number 51 bike on the right belongs to Ian Ridley. Now, you may remember that we showcased Ian's 1975 CC M500 just recently. Well, this is just another one of the immaculate machines in Ian's classic dirt bike collection. Now, straight away you can see that these BSAs are not painted in the traditional colours, and the number 51 bike here of Ian's is actually painted in his own livery, and it's the exact same colours that Ian uses on his trucks and other machinery from his Ridley fabrication business. Now, although both these bikes are very nice and extremely shiny, and they may look like you would need a pair of sunglasses just to sit and stare at them, of course both these machines are still race bikes and are campaigned regularly at Scottish classic events and many of the other big race meetings in the central UK. But this number 51 machine, now this is Ian's 1968 BSA Victor 350 race bike, and as you can see, it's not a fully original bike from that year due to some of the upgrades and personal touches that Ian has bolted on, but essentially it's still a 1960s BSA frame and motor, and this particular 350 power plant has an upgraded lubrication system fitted with that external oil filter cartridge, which is bolted onto the front of the frame. Now, these BSA Victor motors were launched in 1965 and were actually developed for use as scrambles motors by the legendary Jeff Smith, who of course raced them in the 500cc World Championships in 1964 and 1965. Now, they had the standard 4-speed gearbox and a wet oil-cooled multi-plate clutch. Now, as you would expect, drum brakes of course for 1968, and Ian has also added this combined heavy duty chain guide and alloy brake anchor plate. But it's actually hard to imagine that this highly polished machine was going to be covered in mud the following week after the show, but Ian does spend a lot of time and money making his bikes look good, but he also spends the same amount of time racing them on the track. But it's pretty fair to say that when Ian turns up at a race event and wheels this bike out of his transporter and onto the paddock, there's usually a decent crowd starts to gather to ask questions or take pictures of the bikes. But the blue frame, the yellow plastics and that highly polished BSA motor may not be to everybody's liking, and I'm sure the BSA purists who are watching this will cringe at the colour scheme, but for me personally, I love it, and it's a nice change from the original black frame and alloy metalwork of an original BSA Victor. But for me personally, I think this colour scheme with the BSA badge and the Union Jack actually does look better than the original tank livery. Now this oil cartridge filter is an upgrade that you can retrofit to these BSA motors, and it's a much more efficient and easier way to maintain the oil system and keep foreign debris out of the engine oil. Now 2 overhead valves of course on the single cylinder Victor, and also some of the barrel's cooling fins have also been removed, possibly as another weight saving exercise, which is becoming quite a common practice on these old BSA motors. But nevertheless, you have to take your hat off to the way that Ian's prepared this bike for the show, and I know for a fact that at previous bike shows these machines of Ian's have won him some very nice silverware for all his efforts. Although, as I mentioned, this is not just a very nice looking machine, you can almost guarantee that this bike will be back getting covered in mud and grime on the racetrack soon after this bike show. Now our next featured bike, although similar in appearance to Ian's but more like your run-of-the-mill Victor BSA, this belongs to lady motocross racer Helen Cahill. Now Helen also races this BSA with the Scottish Classic Motorcycle Racing Club, and Helen is just one of the very few women who take part in vintage motocross in the UK. Now once again, another superbly prepared machine, and also very quick when this bike gets taken onto the racetrack. Now this machine has a similar power plant to Ian's bike, although this time Helen has gone for a more natural, authentic Victor colour scheme, but nonetheless it's still a nice old British race bike. Now you can see Helen's motor has kept all its cooling fins intact this time, although the engine casing modification has again been carried out on her particular Victor engine. Now I'm not sure what this modification is actually for. I think it's more to do with saving weight and gaining access to the oil feed pipes at the right hand side of the engine's crankcase. Now once again, as per Ian's bike, a 4-speed gearbox with the wet multi-plate clutch, and you can see all the cooling fins on Helen's particular machine here, all still intact. Now much again the same rear brake setup to Ian's machine, again with that combined chain guide and very heavy duty alloy brake anchor fitted. Now as far as I can recall, these bikes were fitted with Italian Seriani forks, and you can see that once again these have been buffed up for maximum bling for the show. But you have to admit that both these bikes are immaculately turned out, and I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Ian or Helen headed home after this show with another piece of silverware or award of some kind for these lovely machines. Now just a week after the show, this was Ian's bike at a Scottish scramble event, getting his highly polished BSA Victor covered in mud and dust. But Ian absolutely loves riding these old classics on the racetrack. Now this is Helen also riding her particular bike at a Scottish Classic event. This was just about a week after the Scottish Motorcycle show, but you can see that Ian was absolutely enjoying riding his lovely Victor. Now of course, as we know, many of these kind of show bikes never ever come into contact with dust, let alone Mother Earth, but not Ian and Helen's machines. These give them the best of both worlds, a cracking show bike and a fantastic weekend racer. This video was brought to you in association with VMX Magazine, your #1 publication for classic, vintage and off-road motorcycles. Just visit their online website for more information.